Things like that. All right. How's everybody doing out there? Hopefully well. I'll put your comment up here. Hit the like button. Yeah, if everybody could just hit the like button on the video a while, that'd be great. I'm not monetized or anything. I don't make any money from it. But the problem is, if people don't hit the like button and don't subscribe, then the YouTube just kind of buries the videos that I put out. So I'll have to probably start saying, hit the like button, please. You know. So if you could do that, that's good. Thank you for making that suggestion. Do appreciate that. So we'll just give it a few minutes here. How's everybody doing out there? So hopefully well. Good. Good to hear that. Hopefully everybody's staying warm. We've had sub-zero temperatures here for a couple of days. It gets cold. Hasn't been real bad during the day, but it's supposed to actually get pretty warm tomorrow. Yeah. All right. I guess we'll get started here. On this video, we're going to talk today about buying land for off-grid living. How do you buy land and everything else? So, well, 3 o'clock a.m. here. Well, there's Cynthia. That's pretty early in the morning. Okay, buying land. I have some experience with this. I'm actually going to be showing our former property today. It's actually right here on the map that I have up. Zooming into that. But I'm going to go over a number of things, some points, and then I'm going to actually get into showing you how to find land. Okay, a good way to do that. Point number one on buying land that you want to avoid is no right-of-ways or legal easements. I will be showing that on the map here. In other words, you can find land sometimes that just is so cheap. Oh, wow, how could it be so inexpensive? But the problem is you have to go through somebody's land to get to it. You have a right-of-way, a legal easement that goes back through. And the problems with that are even best case scenario, you really meet somebody that's a neighbor's great, a good person to deal with. They can still park their truck on your lane on the right-of-way. They just had to pull it there temporarily, and then they get a phone call, and then they have to go someplace, and they think, oh, he's not coming today. And you come when they're gone, and their truck's right there, and you can't get around it. And that's best case scenario. Worst case scenario, you can have some jerk like what I used to deal with, where he has control of the right-of-way going back in, but he's supposed to keep the right-of-way open, and yet he's putting big, huge piles of dirt on the right-of-way, and I'll get around to fixing the road going back in eventually when I have time. And I'm saying, well, you know, I need to get back to my property. Oh yeah, sorry about that. I'll try to get to it, buddy. You know, and the guy's just drunk all the time. That's what I dealt with for a couple of years at our when we were up in Bridgewater, living in Bridgewater, and our property was in Littleton, Maine. Legal easements are never good. I talked to a lawyer actually about it, and when I was going through the whole nightmare we went through, and he said, you know, in the future, he said, my advice to you, he said, there's no such thing as a good, you know, legal easement or right of way. Every single one of them has problems. And he said, I can't tell you how many cases I've dealt with where people had problems with the right of way issue. So do not be tempted by the cheap price of a property that has a right of way going back to it. There's a reason it's cheap. Number two, if you can find land that has recently been logged, especially in an area like here in northern Maine, that land will be cheaper. And I know that I've seen it over in Norway. I saw the one time a guy was showing some land was actually pretty cheap, but it had been logged. And you understand what happens when they log, especially with the modern high yield logging, it's called. They go in with big machinery, and they don't even have guys with chainsaws anymore and skidders. Now it's just these big machines. They grab the tree and they cut the thing off, the tree off, and they lay it down. And what's happening is they compact the soil, especially when on the skid roads and everything else, where they drive with the skidders down through, and they got these huge skidders. I mean, just gigantic things. And I mean, you wouldn't believe some of the equipment up here. I have pictures I could show, but not going to for sake of time. But just huge, big skidders that they pull the logs out, and they run over the soil and they compact it. And I've known of properties where it's 20 or 30 years since it was logged, and yet where the heavy machinery was, it still hasn't regrown trees in that area. Why? Well, because they compact the soil. I mean, how is soil made in a forest? Soil is made by having the trees grow up, or the plants grow up, they die, they come down, they rot, they compost, makes the soil a little bit more rich, and then it just keeps doing that. And then the trees grow, and then their leaves drop, and then that builds up the soil. And it takes many hundreds of years to build that up, but it's not really smashed down and compacted. And when you smash it down and compact it with logging, it's not going to grow very well. It's going to take a long time for, earthworms and things to get in there and kind of aerate that soil. And it's bad. And then you have the water runs off, and it makes a lot of trouble. And again, remember that the modern era of logging with chainsaws and skidders and everything else really isn't that old. It's not even 100 years old yet. You go back 100 years ago, a lot of logging crews were still using crosscut saws and axes, and certainly independent loggers as well. 1922, you wouldn't have had much in terms of mechanization. It would have been, horse logging, probably some steam power, without going into a huge big discussion on the history of logging, which I could do, because it's been an area of study and really fascinating. We actually have a lumbermen's museum right up the road that way, up northwest of our office here. And very interesting story about how that they would, use old steam powered things and whatever else to log. But if you get land that's been logged, to go back to the original point, it's cheaper. And there was a rate here in northern Maine. The realtor that we've dealt with for many years, he told me about it, and it's kind of changed now, I guess, because of all the inflation in the housing market, the super bubble that has been created because of all the people being displaced by the pandemic. So I don't know what it would be now, but if you would buy land that was literally just recently logged in Maine, I mean, that year, you could get it in some areas for $200 to $300, right around $200 actually. And our first property that we bought in Maine, in the town of Littleton, it was $280, I think, an acre. So, and it had been logged hard. I will show some of the proof of that here. But logged land is cheaper, something to consider. You go in there, you can do things to, I mean, you're going to be dealing with a lot of trees where the skidders are, the ones that they left, the trees that they left standing, skidders will go through and they'll just rip the bark right off of those standing trees with the trees that they've logged or that they're pulling out, that they're skidding out. And so you have a lot of damage and things to trees, and but you can help the forest to regrow. It's going to take many years to make that happen, but that's again why it's cheaper. I mentioned this yesterday, no power at the road. If there's no power available, accessible to the property, that also will lower the price and bring the price down quite a bit. Another point to make, if you can buy it without getting a mortgage, it's going to be a lot better. It means, you'll be a lot more free to do things and build things on that land. We've bought our different properties without mortgages, and it definitely makes you a lot freer. It's a good thing. Another possibility in terms of an off-grid homestead would be a cabin on rented land. Okay, there was actually a place, a camp up sort of to the northwest of us, where our property's at, and it's way out in the middle of nowhere. It's an old hunting camp. You know, I think it was a total of 2,000 something square feet, and really nice. But I mean, talk about remote. It was way back there, not quite over into the Allagash Wilderness area, but it's sort of on the border of that. And really amazing place and pretty cheap price. But the problem is getting back to there. You'd be doing a lot of road maintenance, getting back in there, and the issue with rented land is, yeah, you have no neighbors for many miles. I mean, you can be back in the middle of nowhere, but then you are there, and whoever owns that land, that owns that lease, probably it would be Irving here in JD Irving company, big huge logging company. They own almost everything in the state. They probably own the lease to it. Well, your beautiful pristine wilderness camp can all of a sudden become a totally wrecked logging wasteland. You know, then there might be some stipulations where they can't go right up and against the camp or something, whatever, but it's still, you know, could really change. And of course they could say, hey, you know, we have to get rid of the lease here and whatever. I mean, it's tricky when you rent land. I know in Pennsylvania that there were actually camps that would be rented up in the Pennsylvania Grand Canyon, down actually. I always want to say up because I was from Lancaster County and Tiger County was up, so I grew up saying up. Excuse me, but in the Pennsylvania Grand Canyon area of northern Pennsylvania, there were areas where people had cabins built, and they had to rent it from the state. And the state eventually came in and said, you know, some of these cabins and things have to be torn down because it's wilderness land and whatever else. And they actually made the cabins that remained, they told them you have to paint your cabin a certain way. I think it was a white with green trim, like forest green trim. So you get into some weird stuff if it's not your land. You know, and then you have issues of cutting firewood, and you have to get a permit for that, and it's tricky. Works out sometimes, but with the way this government's going, I don't think I'd want to be renting anything from the state. Another thing that you want to make sure of is that there's no fracking in the area, gas wells and things like that. I have experience in northwestern Pennsylvania where they were doing the gas wells back in the 1960s. And there was the place where we were staying, the first place that my wife and I had after we got married, was this little cabin back in the woods, and had electricity and running water and the whole deal. But there were pipes. You'd take a walk out through the woods, and there'd be pipes coming up out of the ground and going over this way. And there's an old well over here and an old motor thing here, and you know, all the stuff from that. They just abandoned the gas well type of thing. They were doing oil and gas, and our water would come out clear, and then you'd let it sit, you'd put it in a pot and you let it sit for 10 minutes or so, it would turn dark yellow. Absolutely toxic. You could not wash laundry, any kind of white laundry there. It would just turn it yellow. I mean, taking a shower, it smelled really bad of sulfur, and all because the water, you know, the aquifer had been completely poisoned over the years. And it still, you know, it won't kill you right away, yeah, but it was bad. So they start getting, if you don't understand what fracking is, if there's shale in an area, they drill a hole down in, and then they put high pressure water down in, and they crack it, and then they can get the methane gas comes out, and they'll pump that out of the gas well and everything else. Well, you say it doesn't sound too bad, but the problem is the chemicals and that they put in with the water to do the fracking, the fracturing, those chemicals can seep into the aquifer, and they oftentimes do. And the gas can seep into the aquifer. It's terrible. Okay. So if you know of a place and they say, well, there's gas wells in the area and there's been some fracking, I wouldn't go anywhere near it. We were looking at some land in West Virginia before we moved to Maine many years ago, because I have family down there. My older sister and her husband are down there. And there were some neat areas that looked really pretty, but the problem was that there were gas wells in the area. And we just said, after what we came from and went through up in northwestern Pennsylvania, there's no way. We don't want anything to do with gas wells. And we looked specifically for places. We were looking at upstate New York, and there was some shale up in that region and things. And we were thinking, okay, there's no gas wells right now, but that could change. And so we moved to Maine because there's not a whole lot of shale up here in this part of the state. And then they, try to do the Wolfton thing and mining up just right, north of where our land is. And so that was a little bit frustrating. It was shot down for right now, but hopefully, they're saying, oh, we're going to still, continue to try, and we'll be back. It's not over yet. So mining is something that you really need to look into. Is there much mining in that area? Another thing to think about when buying land would be, is it a rainy or dry climate? That's going to say a lot about the type of place that you have. How are things going to work out for you? You need to study the climate. What are you going to be able to get water there? And what are you going to be facing when you have a homestead there? Is something else to think about. Another point I'd like to make is a thing of, you say, well, I don't have the money right now. There's no way that I can do this. Well, there's a possibility of multiple people coming together to buy land, and you'd have to work out a really good, deal with that, where you can say, okay, we need to write out on paper who gets what and whatever else. But there are families that come together and they might buy 40 acres of land or something like that, and each family gets 20 acres. Two families each gets 20 acres, or you might get 4 people coming together and each one gets 10 acres of land. So that's a thing that you might consider. But the one thing I need to warn about, and that is the thing of Christian communes or communes in general. I don't know of very many that have ever worked out. Okay. They're very dangerous. They're very bad, because what happens usually is you get people there and everybody's kind of thinking, this is my land. I have a right to be here. And, heads start to get butted. And then there's somebody that you inevitably are going to get somebody that's lazy. They're not going to be pulling their weight. They're not going to be working hard. And then there's other attitudes that flare up, and then they start to get people on this side. It's kind of like going to a church building, it gets cliquey, and then there's problems and they start fighting. If you're going to join together and have a bunch of families buying a property, then you need to make sure that you have enough land that you're not even seeing each other. And you can, hey, could you come over and help me? I need to put up the roof on my place or whatever else. Sure, absolutely. But a commune where everybody that's communal living and those never work out. Okay, and there's some historical examples where it went really wrong, really bad. So I would avoid the thing of, if you're going to have multiple families coming together, fine, but make sure that there's enough land that you don't see each other. But I would avoid communes, communal living. Bad idea. Another thing that you need to think about, especially if you go up north, is what about winter road maintenance? How far back? I mean, you go way back in and whatever else, how are you going to keep that thing plowed out or snow blown out or whatever else? Is there a way that you can park your vehicle out at the end of the lane and snowmobile back in or snowshoe back in or whatever else? We have done that. And it works, but with catalytic converter thieves out there, it's kind of not always the best idea to park your vehicle out at the end of the lane unless it's a really low crime area. But again, this area's been very low crime, but all of a sudden now we're having problems in this area because people are getting desperate for money. So there's a lot of things to weigh out. Another one would be a creek or river crossing. What if there's a body of water that your lane goes back through and crosses? You say, well, that'd be pretty, it'd be nice. Well, until the beavers find the culverts that are underneath your lane and decide that they'd be awfully easy to dam up with sticks and mud and everything else. Yeah, which I dealt with as well. So, uh, so now we're going to get into some of the things here. I'm going to show you where we actually had our property. This map here is the town of, where do we have it here? Littleton. Right there you can see the town of Littleton. Right there. Okay, Littleton, Maine. If you just want to zoom out here, I'll zoom back just so you can see. Okay, it's kind of up in here. The upper part, the crown of Maine is this up here. The Aroostook County kind of comes over here and then down like this. So, but we'll zoom back in here to Littleton. Southern Aroostook Agricultural Museum is a pretty neat place. But you can always tell our property because it looked like we'd always laugh and say it looked like a big stick of gum right there. Okay. And there's our property. You can see how it was logged. All these little lines right here. This is the main lane going back through the skid road that they would bring their log trucks back in. I'll show you here. I'll zoom in. You can see some of the tops that were left over from the logging operation where they would go in there. And this is back towards the back part of the property. This spot right in here, I actually built some things back here. This was exactly 1 mile away from the road. The road being down here. West Ridge Road or Foster Road kind of came down here. So, but yeah, that was our land right there that we had where we were building for a few years before we finally had to sell it. And I will tell you the story here. Right down here, let me zoom in. 270 Foster Road. And I don't care about privacy stuff because we sold this. We're not, we have no connection to this at all here. But this is our neighbor here. This was the neighbor that was a drunkard. Okay, this guy, he lived inside his little barn here thing. And he was a drunken Catholic, and he's dead now. He's in hell. I tried to witness to him. I preached the gospel to him, and he flat out rejected it. Told me, he said, "I will never believe what you believe." Very wicked man. But our right of way was the middle of this lane going back through here, and it was 50 feet wide is our right of way that he was not allowed to build on. Okay, so here to there was fine. But then he decides he's going to put this single wide trailer here right on the right of way and this concrete pad. So you can see how much he's blocking this whole thing off. And so what happened is this was not here when we first bought our land. So we were able to get back in here, but usually he had junk vehicles everywhere. This was sort of a little like I forget, you call it a Quonset hut or like a shelter logic type of deal. That thing there, he had a bunch of junk in that, but just stuff all over the place. And so we were always dealing with the thing of, when we come back, are we going to be able to get even back in our lane? And a lot of times the answer was no. And so again, our land was really cheap. Yeah, we paid just over I think it was about $280 an acre for it. So yeah, it was super cheap, but it was a right of way. That's what I'm saying. Please avoid this whole situation. So you go back in here, and there comes the lane back through the woods. Very pretty. Oh wow, look how beautiful wildernessy like thing looking. There was an old trailer that he'd pulled back into there, and I think his bulldozer and his backhoe right here and here. Again, he put this big pile of dirt right there to fix the road going back in. And this is Big Brook. You can see it says Big Brook right there. And this is where I did a lot of my sermons, right in here. And there were 3 culverts here, one originally, and then he put in 2 more. This was his job, by the way, to keep this whole thing open for me. It was part of the contract and everything, part of the deed and everything else. It was his job to keep this open, and he never did. It was a nightmare. And I'd say, and then he said, hey, I'll do all this work for you and whatever else. And I didn't understand the contract at the time. And so I paid this stupid slob, I think $4,000 at one point in time to do a lot of the work for me, not understanding it was actually his responsibility to keep it open. And, and oh, well, oh, I wasn't aware of this. So it was leading to a court situation where I would have taken him to court and probably had to sue him. I didn't want to, but it was leading to that. And then he died before I could do anything. And they put the place up for auction and we didn't have the money to buy it. So it was kind of oh, great. What do we do? But just to show you here, this perspective of when I would do my sermons there, let me show you this one. Right there is the lane. Right here, excuse me, right here is the lane going back through. You can see it's not, there's these weeds right here because it was not, right there is where it's washed out. And the lane wasn't even open. I wasn't even able to go back through with anything but a four-wheeler or a dirt bike. That's the only way I could go back. Most times we just walked back. We would park about where I'm at there, and then we'd walk back to our property. I'll show back how far it was. But right there is that side part of Big Brook, right in here, like this. So you can see that right there. And then this one, you can see where Big Brook goes up through like that. Again, that's the backdrop for a lot of my old videos if people didn't understand that. Right there. So, oops, this way. So right there, Big Brook going up in. This is where I would stand and do my studies, right in here. And my vehicle would be parked right there, like that. So, excuse me, yeah, over there. So, you go back through here, up along the lane this way, up back through this way, and then right here, you'd hit this corner. And I did a video right here too. Let me show you that one quick. Yeah, right there. Okay, this right here, this backdrop is right there, is where that backdrop is. Inside, look at my weird videos over the years, but you turn this corner and then this was a really steep hill that came up, and this right here is the start of our property. So that entire distance from here, or I should say from here back to there, was 1/2 mile, exactly 1/2 mile. And then from that point right there back to this point right here was another 1/2 mile back in there, going by the way of the lane. So very secluded, very nice back in there. A lot of mosquitoes. That was a pretty terrible thing with all the mosquito stuff back in there. But here's another area of logging damage. There was actually an apple tree right about here. This is an old, what was left of a cabin. You can kind of see right in this area, that's the old, like that would be the chimney, and it had fallen down. I actually built a place over top of this. I was going to build our cabin. It was 24 foot by 24 foot. I was going to build it right there, and we sold it before I could get that done. I had the insulated floor down, everything else. Couldn't get it done before winter, so I put roof metal over top of everything to, keep it snow off of it and everything else. But I was going to, in the spring, I was going to put the walls up and everything else. That would have been our house. There was actually right down in the woods, right in, I think it was about, I'm trying to think of where that was, probably right down in this area somewhere. There was a spring, a really nice spring, very powerful spring, never went dry, even in the driest summers. Really good water, very clean. So it was really a nice spot. But this right here was an old, or maybe it was that. That might have been something I had parked back there at the time, or that might even be the new owner's deal. But this was an old outhouse back here where the mouse is pointing there. This building right back in here kind of has a weird thing there. That's just clear roof material in between the green metal roof material. So you can see the rafters. That's what those hole looking things are. But that was a gas shed that I had built. And then I had parked a fifth wheel trailer right here that we would stay in. I guess they got rid of that, or this might be a picture before that happened. And then you go the whole way back into here. And back in here, I had put up a wall tent in this area, and then I put up a storage building right in here is what I had. That's where we were keeping our stuff. So, and like I said, problem number one, of course, was the right-of-way. This neighbor up in here was awful to deal with. Problem number two, the logged land, oh, it was cheap. Yeah, but there was so much damage to the property that it would have taken me years to fix that. Okay. And of course, no power, no electricity, and there was no way to get it back because they couldn't cross over this brook thing really without a lot of expense. And then of course the river crossing right there, this usually was okay. Like I said, it had 3 culverts which the beavers would dam up quite frequently. And then this right here would always wash out. This area right there would always wash out. Sometimes it would be from here to here would be completely just water going through there, and you'd have to drive through the water to get back in there, and it was something else. So yeah. But I'll just show you an example of how to find land. Okay, just do a Zillow search. I'm used to Zillow. I know Zillow has its issues, but you can use Redfin or some of the other real estate things out there. But just to show you what land goes for in this area up here. Here you have 85 acres of land for $42,500. I'll just click on that one just as kind of a, see now that one there, if you can see that right there, you can see, let me kind of, okay, that's, you can't zoom into that thing at all, but right there it has road access. So look for that, and you'd say, all right, well, there doesn't look like there's any driveway going back into it, but at least there's no right of way. But you'd have to check into it and say, well, you know, is there a right of way there or whatever else. Okay, sitting on Route 1 provides road frontage and direct access. Wood recently harvested within 5 years. So that would mean the price is lower. Property and tree growth tax plan to help or to keep taxes low. Greenleaf Brook runs across front of property looking for affordable land. Well, okay. Another thing that you need to look into is tree growth tax plan. Okay, check what different states will have different things on that. And let me explain that. Because here in northern Maine, if you put a property, or anywhere in Maine, you put your property into tree growth, it lowers your taxes way down. Taxes are very cheap, but you can only log certain areas and build on certain areas of the property. I knew of a property, it was 166 acres of land, and yet only 1 acre was not in tree growth. So you had 1 acre that you could build a house or a cabin or whatever else. Everything else was in tree growth. And if you want to take more land out of tree growth, you'd have to contact the authorities and say, okay, I need another acre for farming, or, you know, another 5 acres, and then you pay a penalty for that. And basically, if it's in tree growth, you have to have, you know, the forester will come out and he'll tell you how to manage your woodlot or whatever. And then you occasionally you have to have the property logged. So it's Maine's way of saying, hey, you know, we want to ensure that we have plenty of land to log out there. So our first property was not in tree growth, and our current property is not in tree growth. Thankfully, we made sure of that because it's really kind of a pain. But 27.66 acres for 44,000. These prices are way too high. It should be down below, especially for this one. It should be below 500 an acre, is what I would say in the old world before pandemic nuttiness happened. But I'll show you here the idea of buying a cabin, you know, with some land. It's 20 acres of land. and this place here, close to the Mattawamkeag River, different things. A little doctored photo there with the sunset. But you can look down through the thing and just a simple basic cabin. This is I was talking about the other thing about an older place on the property. Not anything real fancy or whatever, just to show pictures through it. But if you don't have a lot of money, you can get started on something like that. That stove is not really a good one. Those old cast iron stoves like that, they don't really heat all that well. They leak a lot of air, and so they pull a lot of air in and give very little heat out. Say it that way. Steel stoves are better in my opinion, but this one actually has electricity. So little garden shed, tool shed thing there. But there's the property. So just to show people what's out there. I mean, you could buy a place like that, 20 acres of land, you could build something else, or you could, have a little farm type of thing on it, raise some animals and whatever. But even that, 44.9 years ago, that would have been, before the whole pandemic thing, that would have been a lot cheaper for that place. But there's a place in town of Holton for 29,900. It's northern Maine is a very cheap area. 50,000 for this place here, and just show you that real quickly. You think, oh wow, it looks really quaint and cute and everything. Well, you think so. It looks, wow, look at that. Boy, it's really neat. The drone shot there. Yeah, but the inside, I already looked at this place, is pretty rough. Okay, a lot of people will just walk away from a property and leave just a bunch of junk like that. Insulation falling down. It's like an older guy probably had it, crutches and the walker there, and some water damage up in here. You're getting into that kind of a thing. Washer and dryer, pretty rough. Exposed wires, exposed pipes. But hey, you want to get a place like this and then just use the land or try to fix the thing up or whatever, that's another possibility. As people run out of money and whatever else, it might be the only possibility that you'll have if you don't have a whole lot of money and you want to stay out of debt. So just to show you, I mean, that's some of the stuff you'll run into, especially here in northern Maine. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people up here and they say, yeah, I talked to a plumber the one time and he said people will just abandon their house and walk away and just leave trash in it. I've seen it myself many times. So, but just to kind of compare, somebody asked in the live stream yesterday, what would be the best places to go off grid? And I said, well, any place that's really far away from a city. But a lot of people think of Montana, they'll think someplace like that out in the West. But you compare, properties, what things cost. Again, you might be spending more money, but there's a lot more land out there too. There you have 327,500 for 10.78 acres, 125,000 for 5 acres, 99,000 for 20.37 acres. But then you get down into here, there's 1.9 for 5.5 acres. And that's why, again, a lot of people, they hear that we have land and they say, oh wow, you must be really wealthy. No, our land is cheap here. But you move to some places, it's very expensive. 64,500 for 20.1 acres. That's getting close to what we pay here in northern Maine. Going down through here, there's 1.7 million, but then you're getting almost 3,500 acres of land, 15 million for almost, well over 9,000 acres of land. That's a lot of land. I have seen a few properties up here in northern Maine with their thousands of acres, but yeah, usually not that much. But again, just look at different states. Upper Peninsula of Michigan's a good area for off-grid type of things. But please understand, I'm not trying to draw people. If you're from the city and you think, oh, I'll just go out there, it's, oh man, it's just so cheap. It is cheap, but it's a very hard life. It's an extremely hard life. It's a very good life. And that's why I said in my first part of this seminar, off-grid living is 90% up here and 10% here. Okay, that doesn't mean that only 10% of your day is work and the rest is, thinking, sitting around intellectually thinking of the mysteries of the universe or something. No, what I'm saying is you're working a lot, but you have to have the right mindset for it. You have to say, hey, I'm enjoying this. This is fun. And I want to go out and spend the day to day splitting firewood or going out and working on the road that goes back to my land, or repairing my roof, or taking care of building a chicken coop or something. And you have to think of it as fun and entertainment. If you're just seeing it as work, you're not going to last very long, because it's a very hard life. So hopefully that answers some people's questions. But there you have like I said, just to show it one more time. So there you go. Everybody that's always wondered where was I at there and whatever else, that's the lane that went back to our property. It was not a green screen, like people tried to say. Some people that are a little weird in the head. So, but I guess that should do it for this. I've covered everything in this, and I'll say this again. If you don't mind hitting the like button for the video. Again, I'm realizing this. I'm a little slow sometimes, and I think I don't care if people like it or not, but if if people don't like the video, then the video doesn't go anywhere and it just gets buried in YouTube censorville. So please like the video, and if you aren't subscribed, please consider subscribing. Again, the channel's not monetized. That's not why I'm doing that. I'm just saying, please help the videos to get out there and share them with people that are interested in the off-grid thing. So having said that, does anybody have any questions? Question and answer time here on the off-grid seminar number 3, buying land. Does anybody have any questions that I can answer? Do I know any books that are about cabin building for dummies? Well, there's a there's a bunch of them. That Shelter Shacks and Shanties is kind of an old classic one from the early 1900s, I think. That's a good one. There's a bunch of older, you just go out and you can get ones. I don't know if there's a For Dummies one per se in that series. I don't know about that, but there's a lot of good ones in print out there. What is legal grounds for biogas when buying land? I've never checked into that. I really don't know. What are your thoughts on tiny homes? Well, I live in one currently. It's a good thing. Maybe not for everybody. It's a little bit frustrating sometimes when you're living in an 8-foot wide, building or something that's on wheels. I'll be talking about that tomorrow, actually, with the thing of recycled housing. More about our tiny home. But they're a really good way. Like I said yesterday, here in northern Maine, and well, in the state of Maine, you can actually build a tiny home and have it considered totally legal by the state and whatever else. They actually have provision for tiny homes, and it's a really good way to pay down debt and to live very cheap. You can build one yourself. There's ways that you can use recycled housing, which I'll be covering tomorrow. It's a good thing, in my opinion, and you can live there for a few years and then build up your money and then go out and buy something that you'd rather have. Or if it's a tiny home on wheels, you can even take it someplace else, stay at somebody's property until you have your money saved up, and then buy land, and then take your tiny home to the land, and then buy other land, and you can keep moving your tiny home. So there's a lot of people that do that. There's some really good channels here on YouTube that show you. I think I can't think of some of the names of Living Big in a Tiny House. There's a couple of them, and they show a lot of different types of tiny homes. So something to consider there. With owning land, can one put up an electrical fence for protection? You can, but you know, I guess you could, yeah. Question, in regards to buying land together with family, what if these family members are lost? And you have to be really careful. If you get along with them, okay, but be real careful with that. And again, make sure that you buy enough land that they would be able to have their own land where you're not seeing them. They do their thing, you do your thing. Question, is mineral rights that important? Yes, because if there's some company in the area and they have mineral rights on your property, or there's another company and they have timber rights on your property, you can get into a real mess with that. They can come in and start mining and things in your area or whatever else and really mess up the aquifer so that your water system's messed up. Be a bad thing. What about buying a small chunk of land off someone you know that owns a lot of land, like farmers we know or something, make payments to them instead of bank? Yeah, absolutely. I've known of people, again, that they'll actually go to a farmer and they'll say, I'd like to buy some land. And like, do you have some land to sell or whatever? And they'll actually buy land and they will help out on the farm. I actually knew of a situation where they actually worked at the farm for the land that they bought. So yeah, very good idea. Question, you ever check out using RV fridge connected to biogas, no electricity needed, EMP approved? No, I haven't. Like I said, I don't really know a whole lot about the biogas thing. It's something that I've heard of, but I just have never checked into it. How do you know where to go to forage for berries? Do you just go hiking and run into them? Yes. You have to, understand, obviously, if you want to go into a swamp like this area right in here, whatever, this real swampy area, you're not going to find many red raspberries. They don't really grow in swampy areas. But down in this area, in here, it was kind of dark and a little bit damp down and through there, and there were cloudberries, and that's the area that they like. You want you to understand there are certain areas that berries grow in. You can go find them. So yeah. After purchasing land, are you to pay taxes on it as well as the water? Well, if you purchase land, you're going to pay property tax, but there's no kind of cost for water or anything like that. There's no town water if you're buying remote land, if that's what you mean. I don't know if I got that exactly right. If people can put question before your question, the word question all in capital letters, I can see it a little bit better. If you don't mind, that would be helpful. What states would you say are best to buy property for off-grid living? Well, if you like warmer climates, you can go down south, Tennessee, Alabama, Arkansas, things like that. Then you can go up into the kind of the Missouri and areas and things, and then you can head more towards the north, the more northern states where it's going to get colder and whatever. But you just, the farther you can get away from big cities, the better. So, your New York City, your Boston's, your Miami, Los Angeles, Chicago, the big cities in America, just kind of look on the map and say, okay, how far away can I get from those places? That's going to be the best, if you want to have remote land. Question, can you bury your loved on the property once they are deceased? Never really checked into it. There's one of those things probably would be best just to say, okay, go ahead and do it. Don't ask people's permission for it. If you get caught, you'd have some explaining to do, but I don't know. Question, how do you dispose of dirty, soapy water? Well, the same way that old timers used to do it. They would actually just, sink would go out and a pipe would run out and it just goes right out onto the ground. It's not this, it would be considered gray water. It's not the same as black water, which would be actual waste coming from a toilet, a flush toilet. And we actually do that at our property. And it's funny because where our tiny house is located, it's on an old kind of a stone thing that goes back in, like gravel there, and no plants grow on it because it was where they did a lot of logging, backing the big trucks in and whatever else. And our soapy water, we use good, biodegradable stuff. We don't use chemical, bad stuff. And where our soapy water comes out at is the only place where plants grow on that entire stone pad there. And they grow really prolifically, really nice and tall and everything else. So the dirty soapy water is not a problem for plants as long as you're using the right kind of soap. But good questions so far. Does anybody else have any other questions? I can take that one down. Question: how do you deal with problems with food in a colder climate? Well, it's actually pretty nice. That's one of the things we like about our colder climate, because we have free freezing and even refrigeration for 6 months out of the year. It's pretty nice, actually. If you have a room that's insulated but not heated, you can use it as a refrigerator. Just monitor the temperature, and you can open the door to where your heat's at, so more heat can get in there. There's actually a guy on YouTube that made a refrigerator with doors and everything, that the back part of the refrigerator has little vents that he can open up to the outside to let outside air come in, and so he can regulate his food temperatures and things in there. But you can actually have free, you can put things in coolers and keep it in a building outside, and it stays frozen pretty much all winter long. And if you have a day where it gets up above freezing temperatures, it's going to still stay frozen if you have enough frozen material in that cooler, because they'll keep each other frozen. And you have a day or two of warmer temperatures, but then it goes right back down to freezing again. Usually there's no problem with it. So living off grid in a northern climate is really good. How deep is land packed hard by logging skids? It depends. I mean, we literally have parts on our new property where it's a good probably 18 inches deep, where you can see where the tire treads sunk down with the logger or the big skidder. They can do a lot of damage. And we have nice roads going back through, but they're all rutted out in different areas, and it just does not grow back in. And so we're busy right now trying to fill in those ruts. So that's one of the reasons why it's very cheap, because they basically ruin the land, and you have to really work hard to get it back to what it should be. Question: what about networking concerning buying land in case brethren in need to flee their country? Brethren, thank you for bringing that up, because that's something that I think is going to be a very big issue in the future. And we've prayed about that, and eventually we might try to set up something, but there's going to have to be rules and a lot of things there. We will have to help each other out in the future. I believe that. So, and I think that the northern parts of whatever country are going to be very sparsely populated as times progress into the future, because the cost of fuel is going up, and all the environmentalist green agenda and everything. They're going to be pushing people towards the smart cities, because that's the system of the Antichrist. Firmly believe in that. And so the northern areas are going to be a good place to live, but you have to learn how to live there. And especially if there's no winter road maintenance or something, along those lines, it's going to be tough for people. But our ancestors did it if you're Northern European. So, answer another one here. Question: I had to go, so it may have been answered. What telltale signs are there to know if there is accessible well water on the property you're interested in? No, I didn't cover that, actually. It's a good one. I will be talking about that in more detail in an upcoming seminar. Not sure which one it is. Okay, number 6, finding water. Well water on a property can be tricky, especially if you move into a mountainous area, because the higher up you go in elevation, the harder it is to get water there, and drilling can go way down in. And I mean, I've heard of people with wells that are hundreds of feet deep, and but then I know of, mountainous areas too where there's a spring up, actually climbing up the mountain, and the water comes out of the mountain. So that's a big thing to look for. You could have, different types of springs can come up actually through the ground, especially during the spring time of the year. Sometimes they'll dry up in the summer. It's another thing to get figured out. There could be a local spring in your area. That's what we have, that is active for most of the year. It's only 2 or 3 months in the summer that it dries up. But I'll be covering that in part 6. So, question: can you have multiple houses on one property? Depending on the property, depending on the area, absolutely. Yeah, you can do that. Question: my ancestors are Southern European, but I can't handle the cold. Is there any food that would benefit from colder climates in the U.S.? Yeah, I mean, there's the growing season. That's actually another part. That's another seminar. Let's see which one it is. Number 8. Seminar number 8. Warm versus cold climate. There are some places down south here in America, and whatever countries everybody's in, there are warmer areas many times. Unless you live like in Canada or something, then you're kind of stuck with the cold north. But here in America, you can move to the south. There are areas where you can go to that are going to grow a lot more food. So there's definite benefits to that. So, but and of course, I'm seeing, one of you there is saying about Guyana. Yeah, I mean, you can go other countries too and things, South America and whatnot. So there's a lot of places that you can go. It's a big decision to make where you want to live and things. So, but we're coming up towards about an hour, so I'll answer one more question here I see, and then that'll be it. Question: do you still use your Berkey for filtering water? If so, do you add minerals to it? We do not use the Berkey at the present time because we don't need it. We have a really good spring in the area, and very good water, and so we really don't need it. But we would use it if we have to ever do rainwater or whatever else. So, okay, one more, and then I'm done. Best way to find a woman to marry who'd be happy living in an off-grid lifestyle. Another one I'll be covering in a future study, but be talking about that. Best way to find one is just simply to pray. First and foremost, if you're saved, you pray like crazy and say, Lord, I'd really like to have a wife that could, live this kind of life. You find a girl that's into the outdoors, camping, things like that. A girl from that likes to, she's from the country, she's a farm girl, whatever. But it's just mostly a matter of prayer. So that's going to be it for this video. And thank you to everybody out there for watching, for your comments, for your questions. And like I said, just please share these videos to help them to get known and whatever else. Thank you to everybody out there for your donations too. I'd like to say that if you want to donate to the ministry to help this project out, because it's a lot of work, GoFundMe. We have a GoFundMe page you can find that, or you can go to my website, kingjamesvideoministries.com, and we have PayPal there. So that's all I'm saying about that. But just enjoying this so far. Come on, get down. Dog's trying to jump up here. And we will see you tomorrow. Tomorrow we will be talking about recycled housing in the fourth part of the seminar. So we will see everybody then.